We now have five who voted for Donalds. That means that on this roll call, at least McCarthy will not, most likely will not get the Speaker's gavel. Garrett Haake, let's also catch up on a couple of people who have moved into what would be the Speaker's office. Roy Donalds and Andrea, Scott Perry. Do we know anything about what's up?
Not the Speaker's office, Andrea. So what's happened here, the minute this vote got underway, several of the members of that anti-McCarthy faction hightailed it off the floor. Chip Roy, Scott Perry, Byron Donalds, himself the nominee for Speaker, followed shortly thereafter by Dan Bishop, who had just introduced Byron Donalds, and Lauren Boebert. They're not talking, but they have all ended up in another office that's being used for some of these negotiations, about downstairs, about 100 yards away from where I'm standing right now, with some of the McCarthy allies like French Hill, other Republican members who've been trying to kind of midwife these negotiations between McCarthy and his opponents. And I think it's noteworthy that for the first time in as many days as we've been covering this, none of those folks were talking. They were very tight-lipped on the way out. A lot of no comments, a lot of we're just going to keep talking. This is a situation in which the absence of new information suggests to me a certain amount of activity here. We knew going into this vote, Kevin McCarthy told me on the way to the floor, told other reporters, no expectation that the vote totals here will change. But the fact that people are having these closed-door meetings now and clamming up in public is typically a signal that something is actually noteworthy of afoot. And we've got more work to do as reporters to figure out what.
And I know you're all over this. Thank you so much, Garrett Haake. Steve Kornacki, let's catch up with the vote count. This is the 7th. And we know that something is beginning to shift, certainly with the agenda vote yesterday, what was referred to by John James in his nominating speech of McCarthy as a small victory, their first victory. They won 216 to 214 last night, a signal that maybe there was some give among McCarthy's supporters and some of the 20 who were refusing to go along.
Well, yeah, real interesting to hear what Garrett is describing there, the potential activity, and very curious to see what, if anything, shakes out there. But, yeah, as you can see, form is holding. We just track on every vote. The folks who have voted against McCarthy on previous ballots, how are they voting as they go through this roll call? And you can see right now they all continue to vote against McCarthy, for Donalds. Alphabetically, Donalds, the next name to be called. Sounds like from Garrett's reporting, he may not cast a vote right away. They might come around to him at the end. Curious, though, to hear, Donalds has been voting for himself. Will he continue voting for himself in this round? And again, you just look down the list. These are all the names to come alphabetically here. Is there going to be anybody on this ballot who switches over to McCarthy? It's academic at this point in the sense that he's not going to be settled on the 7th ballot. This will go to an 8th ballot. But would there be any budge toward McCarthy as these later names are called? Also, are there going to be any peel-offs from McCarthy? We haven't heard any of those yet. One name that was called early, Ken Buck of Colorado, who'd been sending some public signals that maybe he was through voting for McCarthy. He did vote for McCarthy. So you take a look at this list. We'll see what is to come from it. But you mentioned that motion to adjourn last night that got them out last night. It was a win for McCarthy, but if some kind of a deal with some of these renegade faction does emerge, keep in mind there were still 4 Republicans who voted against that motion to adjourn last night. That was Andy Biggs, Lauren Boebert, Eli Crane, and Matt Gaetz. 4. Even if McCarthy strikes a deal with a lot of these renegades here, 4 is the maximum number of Republicans he can afford voting for somebody else. And there were 4 who wouldn't even vote to adjourn last night. And you see, they just make the top of this list. There are other names